Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little, and today we're going to be discussing the limitations of charts. Most people want to think that they can just print out a simple set of charts, follow them, and life will be great. But I hate to break it to you, if you do that, the charts will light your money on fire. And as a poker coach, I don't want to see you light your money on fire. So, first things first, when are charts useful? Mainly when there's been little or no action from the other players and you know how your opponents are going to play. Now, in poker, usually there will be some action from other players, and you don't know how your opponents are going to play. So they're often not so useful, right? Also, most charts are designed to give you the game theory optimal strategy. And you have to realize that the game theory optimal strategy often should not be followed if you know what your opponents will do incorrectly. For example, if you're playing at a table where everyone folds to you in the cutoff and you can just tell the players to your left are all folding, they can't help themselves, their cards are almost in the muck, you should open any two cards, right? What if two of the guys to your left look excited, they're getting their stacks ready to put in the pot? Well, now you shouldn't raise any of your junk. But if you just shut your eyes and follow a chart, you're going to make some mistakes. So let's talk about the most basic charts, which are all-in or fold charts. So these are useful in a very specific instance when there are no payout jumps coming in the near future, and when you have 10 big blinds or fewer from late position, or 8 big blinds and fewer from early position. Clearly, that's not going to happen all that often, and if you do find yourself that shallow stacked in a tournament, you probably messed up somewhere. One thing I do want to point out, though, is that most shove fold apps will give you shove fold numbers for many, many big blinds. I've seen one app out there that gives you 40 big blinds shove or fold numbers. And that, you're never just going to open shove whenever everyone folds to you for 40 big blinds. That is an egregious mistake because you have other options. You can min raise, you can limp, you can raise to 3 big blinds, right? You don't have to be all in. I do have a completely free push fold app, by the way, and it is very, very useful in specifically the very, very, very short stacked scenarios of 10 big blinds or less when there are no payout jumps looming. You can get that for completely free at jlpoker.com/app, and it's easy to use at the table. It works very quickly. You press a button, move to the next hand. It shows you exactly what you should do on the next hand, as opposed to many other apps out there that require you to go back, find the spot again, enter the number of big blinds. This app keeps track of it and lets you use it at the table. Obviously, you use it before the hand starts, you memorize the chart, and put the phone down. Um, it is very important to realize that in all-in or fold charts, the only options they give you are to shove or fold. And whenever you have 12 big blinds or more from the small blind or the button, you should definitely be using a limp shove or fold strategy. You have other options. You may opt instead to use a min raise, a shove, or a fold strategy, which is also fine, especially from the button. From the other positions, you should be using the shove, min raise, fold strategy. And you want to make sure whatever strategy you use is implementable, but at the same time, don't be lazy. So many people come to me saying, I'm just going to use the shove or fold chart because it's easy. And what is easy does not make the most money. So let me give you a very clear example of this. 15 big blinds from the small blind. Take a look at this. If you use only a shove or fold strategy, you can only go all in with 64% of hands. Now, 64% of hands is a lot. But if you use this game theory optimum strategy, which has you going all in only with 23% of the hands, so 24% of the hands that are red here, you're limping a whole load of hands, and then you're folding the absolute trash because you're getting good pot odds, right? So as you see, you get to actually play 21% more hands if you just study the game theory optimal strategy. And again, game theory optimal strategy may not even be correct because let's say the player in the big blind folds a lot, you should be raising a ton. Well, you always want to be exploiting whatever your opponents do incorrectly, but it is important to know where to start. And this is where to start. A shove fold chart is not where you want to start. And if you are blindly following a shove fold chart in that scenario, you are simply playing worse than your opponents who play well. Next, let's talk about the calling of an all-in chart. This is when someone goes all in front of you, and now it folds to you. Now, these are only useful if you know the very specific strategy your opponent is using. And if you think about this right, if your opponents are not following a shove or fold chart for their, let's say, 12 big blind all in, let's say they do use a min raise shove or fold strategy, well, then clearly your calling of all in charts are going to be wrong because they're assuming a different shoving range than what your opponents are actually using. And so essentially the push fold apps out there assume the opponents are using a shove fold strategy that we already know is very likely not optimal. For example, from the big blind, facing a 15 big blind, small blind all in, if the opponent's using a shove or fold strategy with 64% of hands like we just showed, you should call with 44% of hands. But if they're using our GTO strategy here, only shoving these hands in red, well, clearly you have to call tighter, only 29% of hands. So understanding your opponent's strategy is very important. And if you don't know it, you should default to the idea that your opponent's probably playing well if you're playing high stakes tournaments. If you see them using a shove or fold chart, right, you see them playing with it on their phone, well, then you know to call with the 44%. Whereas if you know that they are strong players who aren't just blindly shoving or folding and lighting their money on fire, then you should be calling with 29%. That's a very, very big difference. Next, let's talk about reshove charts. Reshove charts have been around for forever. Someone recently put them in an app, and everyone who's following them is, again, lighting their money on fire. So say someone raises, and it's on us, and we have, let's say, 25 big blinds, or 20 big blinds, or 30 big blinds, whatever. There certainly are plenty of hands that you do want to shove with in this scenario. And that may be good or bad depending on your opponent. First off, you really have to know what the opponent's opening with, right? If the initial raiser is a maniac, let's say, you can actually jam super wide, way wider than a reshove chart will tell you. If they are opening only aces, kings, and queens, well, clearly we shouldn't be shoving all that much. So again, following charts is very risky in these scenarios because really, you can design a chart for any scenario, but the chart assumes a lot, right? And it's very, very hard to know what your opponents are doing. And if you do know what your opponents are doing, very rarely it is exactly one specific strategy. So again, these GTO charts usually, the actual game theory optimal charts, when someone raises, includes a lot of calling. Probably more than many people, much more of a calling range than many people use. And you want to make sure you're using all of your options while still keeping an implementable strategy. And actually, at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how to get my implementable 15 big blind charts, which will save all of you a ton of money if you are now currently using a shove or fold chart only. So let's talk about this again very briefly. If the opponent raises too wide, take a second and think about this. Say we know folds to the guy in the cutoff and he opens 100% of hands. We should be shoving much wider than any chart out there will suggest. And if they only raise with the nuts, we should be shoving much tighter, right? Also, you have to take into account tournament dynamics. I've seen so many people using shove fold charts on a final table bubble or right when they get in the money or really anytime there's a payout jump. If you do that, you are making a big mistake. The dynamics of what is happening at the tournament are highly important, and the shove fold charts are not taking those into account, and no charts take those into account. So let's take a look at a reshove chart. In this scenario, we are on the button against the cutoff raise. Okay, so in this scenario, cutoff min raises, and we're on the button. As you see here, we get to call with 4.1% of hands. Now, this may not seem like a lot, but if you think about the all-in range of 14%, it's actually like a 25, 30% increase to the total range, right? We were playing 14, now we're playing a total of 18. So it's a pretty big increase. And notice the calling range in this scenario, the calling range are the aces, right? Which just play always very, very well. And then some hands that flop pretty decently. Here's an example of the situation, button versus cutoff with 25 big blinds. Now this is a little bit deeper. You see, if you're using a shove fold chart in this scenario, where you're a reshove chart, you see that you're making a very big mistake because now you're actually supposed to flat call with 13% of hands out of your total 23% range, right? So over half of your range is flat calling there. And many people are just blindly using the reshove or fold charts and they are making egregious mistakes because they can't play this wide of a range, which means they play fewer hands profitably. And they're just not, I mean, that just means they're not maximizing value, right? We want to make money from playing poker, and shutting your eyes and following a chart that assumes you only have two options is a mistake. Next, deep stacked preflop charts. Again, these are sometimes useful. They're nice guidelines, but they certainly are not something that you should follow blindly. And remember, if you know what opponent's mistakes, you should be adjusting, perhaps significantly. Charts that explain how to proceed after someone acts must be adjusted significantly. You can't just sit there and blindly follow them. We do have some very basic preflop range charts, by the way, at pokercoaching.com/charts. But like I said, you have to be very careful following them. So to wrap this up, poker is complex, and charts are a great way to teach novice players basic guidelines. But look, if you all are here watching this, you are not a novice. I'm trying to help you actually win significant money for poker. And if you don't use all of your options and no limit Texas Hold'em, right? You have all the options. You are making a big mistake. Instead, learn how to play fundamentally sound, which means learning the actual game theory optimal strategy and then learning how to adjust it. I've made the 15 big blind implementable GTO charts that I have available for you. You can click on the link below this video to check that out. Let me just briefly scroll down and show you. What I've done is instead of having a PioSolver image like this one here that is kind of hard to implement, what I've done is I've taken a chart like this and combined some of the hands. So perhaps we would take King 9 and King 8 and play King 9 as an all-in all the time, King 8 as a call all the time. It's not perfect, but it is implementable. It's easy. So I made these charts that are roughly GTO. They're not perfect GTO, but you can easily have this up on your phone or whatever. And then you can look down and know how to play these ranges, and you will be playing almost GTO in a way that you don't have to worry about like randomizing your play, right? Because I realize that is difficult and beyond the scope of what most people want to be doing with their lives. So we have raise first in charts. We have facing raise first in charts, like if somebody raises in front of you. Again, we list a lot of the calling ranges. We have the jamming ranges. And again, it's not perfect, but it is implementable. And these are available completely for free for you. Also, if you are a Poker Coaching Premium member, you can get access to that at pokercoaching.com/premium. You have access to the 25 big blind charts, the 40 big blind charts, and we're always adding more and more content there for the members. So get your free charts, start using those instead of ones that don't give you all of the options, because remember, we are playing no limit Texas Hold'em, not all in or full Texas Hold'em.